Hello friends. A friend of mine has taken admission for a program in distance mode. She gets her study material through learning management system, that is through online mode. Now this version of distance education was not in existence since its inception. Distance education came into existence say about 5 decades ago. It was of completely different nature than it has today. This change in its nature, its modality has not happened over a period of few days or few months, but it is a very prolonged process. In this session, we are going to understand how this process of evolution of distance mode has been through various models. After going through this module, you will be able to explain the aspects of distance education, explain the 5 models of distance education, and compare the models of distance education. In this session, we are going to discuss many models of distance education. In order to understand this process of evolution, let us first get our lens clear by understanding the various aspects of distance education. In distance education system, one of the main feature is the students and the teachers, they are separated geographically from one another. So thus the communication is through a long distance. It is not face-to-face mode where the teacher would get the benefit of the expression of the students on her teaching, or that is as a feedback where the teacher is understanding whether the student is getting the concept or otherwise. Since a distance education has to handle a very large group of students at one given point, there is a separate system of organization of this educational system or organization of the whole teaching learning episode. In distance education, it is termed as operation of distance education. It is such a large system that a whole group of people work towards it. They see to it that whatever has been planned or designed for the coursework, it is actually implemented in reality. Thus, the organization becomes an essential and a considerably big part of any distance education institute. This is a unique feature once again as against the conventional mode of teaching, where the teacher has to handle maybe max 100 students at a time. In comparison to that, the educational organization becomes a whole-fledged task in distance education. Since in distance education, the teacher has to handle a lot of students at one given time, there is a lot of organizational aspects involved. So there is a wedlock between the technology and distance education. One cannot think of distance education without using technology, especially in the latest era. In distance education, the students and the teachers are separated from one another. The teacher has to pass on the study material to the students, maybe in the form of print or maybe through the web media. But the teacher has to ensure that the students have understood the concepts clearly, and for this purpose, the two-way communication becomes essential in case of distance education. We have seen that in distance mode, the students are separated from the teacher, but they face one more separation as a student. They are separated even from their fellow learners. The learners would be geographically spread over a big area, and thus they would not even know who the other fellow learners would be, where they are staying, what is their purpose of getting enrolled for the particular program. As a result, they face a lot of isolation as a student. This is a very peculiar case in the context of distance mode. and both the students and the teacher have to work towards this isolation. In distance education, the system handles large number of students at one given time, and that is why they have to produce the study material also in large numbers. May it be even the exam, they have to produce the question papers, or they have to make arrangements for conducting the exams for a very large number of people. This demands working at the mass scale and not on the smaller scale. This mass scale feature is very much parallel to the concept of industrialized form, and that is why feature of industrialized form is one of the important features of distance education. All these features of distance education will be useful for us in our further discussion of understanding the various models of distance education. In order to understand the various milestones of progress of distance education, let us first understand the various aspects of comparison of the various models. The first aspect of comparison is about the flexibility that the distance education model offers. This flexibility is on the aspects of the time that is available for the learner to study, the place that is available for the learner, and the pace at which one wants to study. So if one wants to use say 3 months for studying a module, that kind of freedom is given to the learner, whereas another learner may study the same module within a month. Similarly, they are located at various geographical locations, so they get the flexibility of place. And similarly for the pace, that is the speed with which one wants to study, is also given to the learner. So there is a flexibility on these three aspects. Another level of flexibility is in the terms of the various media that are being used. When we see the various models of distance education, we shall be able to see the level of flexibility given to that model in terms of media usage. The next aspect is about the refinement of the material. We know that the system of distance education came into existence 5 decades ago. When it was newly being operated, the quality of the material was not so refined, especially the interactivity aspect was not so much into existence. Whereas as the models have moved further, one can see the level of refinedness in the study material. This refinedness may be in the form of the particular media in the use, or even the multiple media being used at the same time. Another aspect of comparison is the interactivity that the model offers to the learners. As we have seen in one of the attributes of distance education, that the learners are very much isolated in their own corners. So their interactivity with one another, as well as with the teacher, the interactivity with the learning material is very much crucial. It plays an important role for keeping the learner on the path of learning. And that is why this aspect is crucial for comparing various models. As we know, the system of distance education is an industrialized form of teaching learning. Thus, anything that happens in distance education has to be on the mass scale. The kind of infrastructure that is required in distance education is not developed separately, but the already existing physical infrastructure in the form of various schools, institutes, colleges is used in distance education. Even while using this form of already existing infrastructure, there is some cost factor associated with it. So this is an aspect of comparison, that to what extent this cost is needed for operating a particular model of distance education. Thus, we have seen 4 aspects of comparison of various models of distance education. When we will discuss each model, we will be talking about that model on these 4 aspects. There are total 5 models of distance education that we are going to discuss. The first one is the correspondence model. Second is the multimedia model. Third, the tele-learning model. Fourth, the flexible learning model. And the fifth one, the intelligent flexible learning model. These models are also termed as generations of distance education. We shall see in detail each model or generation one by one. The correspondence model being the first generation of distance education, it is the most crude form if it is to be compared with the latest model. So here one can see that the flexibility of place, time and pace was given to the learners, but the flexibility of media was not available to the learner. The study material was primarily and only being produced in the print form. Thus, as the name depicts, correspondence, the study material was developed in the print form on the mass scale, and it was dispatched to the learners at their places. And that's how the distance education system would work. In this case, this being maybe their first attempt to write the materials for the distance learning system, there was some level of refinement, but it would be still comparatively, it was still a crude form as compared to the more and more refined form that we see today. In this first generation, since the only mode of communication was through the print media, there was almost non-existence of the interaction. There was not much scope for the learner to respond to the learning material or not give the feedback about the learning material or one's own learning. Since this mode was highly dependent on the print media, there was equally a need of having the face-to-face mode communication sessions. And thus, the cost of the institutional involvement in this whole process was comparatively much higher. The second generation, which is termed as the multimedia model. As the name depicts, there are more than one media used in this particular generation. The system of distance education has come out of the print media at this particular model. So from this model onwards, one is able to see the use of very many media in the delivery. In case of this generation 2, the media like print, audio tape, videotape or computer-based learning and interactive video were into use. As compared to generation 1, one can experience the little more refinement of the material because the experiences of generation 1 of only print media were on the background. Here again the interactive delivery was almost non-existent and the institutional variable costs were not as high as in generation 1, but still the costs were higher. Generation 3, the tele-learning model. Here one had the flexibility of media of audio teleconferencing, video conferencing, audio graphic communication or broadcast TV, radio or audio teleconferencing. In this model, one had the flexibility of media such as audio teleconferencing, video conferencing, audio graphic communication, broadcast TV or radio and audio teleconferencing. Thus, one had many options of media as compared to generation 2. One peculiar feature of this generation 3 is There is no flexibility of time, place and pace. This can be noted because of the requirement that the learner and the teacher need to be at the same time, same place, or in other words, they need to be in synchronous communication with each other. And in that term, this flexibility is taken away from the learner. The material was certainly more refined as compared to the earlier generations. The advanced interactive delivery was still non-existent even after the distance education system reaching the third generation. The institutional costs were still high and the attempts were still made that how the cost could be reduced further. The fourth model, the flexible learning model. In this case, there was an option of even more and better refined or sophisticated media. The options of media available in this fourth generation were interactive multimedia online, internet-based access to www resources, and computer-mediated communication. Thus, the media available for generation 4 were comparatively moving towards more intelligent and more sophisticated media. With more sophisticated media available during generation 4, the material was better refined in this case. With the help of advanced technology, the advanced interactive delivery was also possible from generation 4. So maybe something which was not feasible or possible in the earlier generations, they were possible first time during the generation 4. Also, the institutional involvement cost got reduced in comparison to the earlier generations. Now, this has its reasons in the media that were available during generation 4. We saw that interactive media were available during generation 4. This reduced the requirement of learners and the teachers meeting each other through face-to-face mode as a contact session, and that has played a major role in reducing this institutional cost. The fifth and the latest generation is the intelligent flexible learning model. This gave a lot of flexibility in terms of media usage. The various options available for media were interactive multimedia online, internet-based access to www resources, computer-mediated communication using automated response systems, campus portal access to institutional processes and resources. One can see through these options that the learner autonomy has increased to such a great extent because of the various media that are available. Systems have become much more automated because of the tremendous capacity of the media and the options that are available in the generation 5. With the use of such an intelligent system of media availability, the learning material got further refined to a great level. It also ensured a lot of interactivity between the learning material and the students. As one of the media available was something like institutional portal, which reduced the need of bringing the students and the teachers at one point physically for handling various administrative aspects. And thus it played a major role in slashing down the institutional cost to almost zero. So this is the latest generation, maybe the state-of-art generation as of now. In India, the distance education system may not be in the generation 5, but definitely in the Western countries, the system has reached this 5th generation. Comparison of models of distance education. We have seen all the 5 models individually one after the other. we shall now take a comprehensive look of all the models together in comparison with one another. Now here in this tabular form, one can see that the generations are compared on the various aspects that we have discussed earlier, that is flexibility, the refinedness of the materials, the interactivity available, and the institutional variable cost, whether it is approaching zero or otherwise. In this particular part of the table, you can see that the first three generations are being compared with each other, and one can see that the first two generations are having the flexibility of time, place and space, whereas the third generation does not give that kind of flexibility. The refinedness of material is definitely existing right from the first generation, but it would be more and more refined as one would go from the first generation to the later ones. The interactivity available was zero initially, which has gone to some interactivity till the third generation of distance education. Institutional cost was not at all approaching zero in the beginning. So, we have seen that even in the first generation, this institutional cost was high, and even till the third generation, the institutions were not successful in reducing this cost to almost zero. This is the second part of the same table in which the model 4th and 5th are compared. Here we can see that flexibility has been maintained for all time, place and space. The refinedness of the material also is continued and is more and more refined as we move to 5th generation. The interactivity is also increased when we move towards the latest generation, that is the 5th one. Here an important aspect to be noted is the institutional variable cost is gradually approaching zero as we move towards the 5th generation. So the 5th generation is helping lot of learners in getting educated without having to shell lot of money from their pocket. This reduced cost has helped lot of learners to get educated without having to shell money from their pockets to a great extent. This kind of cost cutting has given rise to many options of using the 5th generation for the learners. After having the tabular form of comparison, now let us attempt the graphical form of comparison of all the 5 models. In the tabular form, we have gone into the minute details of every model and we have compared them with each other. In the graphical form, we will not go into these minor details, but we shall see them as a mega comparison. In this graphical comparison, we have tried to compare the various models on the x-axis. The x-axis starts at the year 1970, where the UK Open University came into existence, and it has been shown till 2015, that is the current phase. These are compared on the various aspects, so one can note that as one moves from the first generation, that is the correspondence, to the intelligent flexible model, on the aspects of interactivity, variety of media available, the system intelligence and refinement of material, the correspondence model, that is the first generation, was low on these aspects, whereas the 5th generation has progressed towards high. On the other side of this graph, one can see that the cost cutting was there due to the institutional variable cost approaching zero as one moves from correspondence education, that is the first generation, to the 5th generation. There was the highest cost of correspondence education and as compared to the lowest cost of the intelligent flexible system of today. We have seen all the 5 models of distance education. One can see that as one progresses from first to the 5th model, there is more of flexibility available to the learner. It is also termed as it is more of WWW available to the learner. Now these 3 W's refer to when one wants to study, what one wants to study, and where one wants to study. So the kind of flexibility that has been on offer now in today's era is much more as compared to when the distance education system came into existence. As of today, we have the 5 models of distance education. One never knows, maybe 20 years, 50 years down the line, we may come up with some few more models of distance education. This has been a process of evolution over the period of 50 years, and I am sure that this journey will be continued even in future, taking the distance education and even the learning system to a very different dimension. Thank you.